patriarchy has been with us a few thousand years. It took a couple of thousand years to really establish itself and separate from the power of the feminine. There was a time before patriarchy when the women ruled, and not a lot of our culture has memories of that. I think it falls mostly in the category of traumatic memories get suppressed. The legends there are of the time before patriarchy, the only ones, or the oldest that I've found, have been African ones. Africa seems to have some deep traces of some old knowledge here and there. And one of my favorite African legends of the start of patriarchy says that the men in a village, one particular village, noticed one day when the old matriarch died that the new matriarch wasn't quite in her fullness, quite in her power. And they managed to get her, and not just her, all the other women, pregnant simultaneously. And being pregnant, they were somewhat helpless, and the men managed to take over and then go forth and liberate men from other women's households and towns and so on, and get patriarchy going. Whatever the truth of those old legends are, whatever the truth of that history is, from the European end, if you look up the stories of the Summer King and so on, you'll see that in the matriarchal times, it looks like the women didn't have much more use for the men than, picking the best breeders. And apart from that, using the men that were loyal to them to keep the men that weren't under control. Not much use for men in the main. That was round about it. I'm trying this little microphone plug-in-the-ear thing. Laptop talks. The idea is I do it just on the laptop, and hopefully this is a bit of a sound upgrade. So, anyway, a little bit of background there on the dawn of patriarchy. But now, of course, talking about patriarchy, we're not at the dawn of patriarchy. We're at the end of it, the very end of it. It's been a good run, and it's winding up. If my smoking affects you over the internet, it's psychosomatic. Okay. However it affects me, that's expected. Okay, so patriarchy is ending. Now, that may not be obvious to many people. To me, it's pretty axiomatic, pretty automatically obvious. Maybe I should mention the symptoms. So the biggest, most obvious symptom is what's happened to, you could say, the guidance system of patriarchy. Now, when things were ruled by the feminine provides the overview, discerning something regular and cyclic, like tides coming in and out, planets moving. Discerning, regular events, animals coming to a waterhole, and things like that. That's all, you could say, in the sense of tactics. But when it gets to strategy, that's where the feminine comes in. The broad overview, being able to get a feeling for which way the clouds are going to go. Dealing with stuff that is indiscernible mathematically, like the opening of a Go game, as opposed to the closing of it. If you don't know what AlphaGo is. Google AlphaGo and have a look how the machine minds are doing in terms of competing with humans. AlphaGo's may be a good topic for another talk, because in structuring the program to play that game, which requires overview and linearity, they more or less had to create an emulation of a human mind, and the parts of it, and working in synchronousness. But there's a topic for another time. Back to patriarchy. So patriarchy lost over time, and pretty much at the beginning, the overview of the feminine. I mean, a male can have overview. I consider myself to be way ahead of the average woman and way ahead of pretty superior women in terms of my feminine capacity, my overview. But just as the very best women in the world at tennis cannot really step in and compete with the very best men of tennis, they know there's a huge gap there. Same with me and overview and the very best feminine minds, not necessarily always in women's bodies, but in the scale of where a strategic mind can go to and where overview can go to. I'm okay, I check out pretty strong, but I'm really not in the stratospheric category. Now, without that quality, without that quality of overview on the, sort of basically being excluded, patriarchy runs on a linear, on the masculine brain. So there's it had to lose the overview of the feminine. However, it couldn't lose what the overview of the feminine did for it. The overview of the feminine guides, is what it does. And so patriarchy needed some guidance way back when. Different peoples did this different ways. The old Greeks, they almost kept the power. Well, they tried to educate their men to that capacity of overview, mature them to the fullness of themselves, and their, a full human being has masculine and feminine mind capabilities, and so then they had men with the full capacity of a full functioning human being to guide them. The way they created those men is basically through the hetiaras. They actually used women of power, included them in their culture as important members of the culture, significant members. And these women of power, sort of within patriarchy, educated the patriarchs and developed the best of them to that feminine quality of overview. And that's where the Greeks had such awesome statesmen and so on, and philosophers. Socrates on the philosophical end, just as well as all the major political and scientific thinkers of Greece, were raised to that capability by the hetiaras, by the women of power. So other areas of patriarchy and later in patriarchy, there aren't women of power around at all. I mean, most patriarchy just made an intensive mission about getting rid of them, or certainly at a stage got rid of them. The witch hunts of Europe, that part of the world, that's a huge, that was, their time of eliminating the feminine. So what patriarchy had going, what patriarchy has as a substitute for that overview of the feminine, is principle. Patriarchy used to have all sorts of principles, from the Hippocratic Oath, that is now just really the Hippocratic Oath, through to the principles of a lawyer and the principles of a governor, principles of governance, all these things. Every area of life had principles. There were principles of a captain of a ship at sea, and so on. And why I say this is an area where you can see a huge symptom of the decline of patriarchy is that you can see, if you look at the world, you can see the ending, the collapse, or the condensation, really, of all principles into one, and the one being the principle of profit, money, profit. What used to make patriarchy work was the tension between principle and profit. And that's where people showed their character, and the principle was there, which enabled society to curb and stop excesses of, the power mad and the incredibly greedy and that kind of thing. And now we've had a collapse of that. All principle is condensed now into profit. It's rare these days to find someone studying medicine or practicing medicine because they have an urge, a desire to be a healer. There are a few, and a few of them might survive the training, or their attitude might survive the training, might. But I think we all know that a license to practice medicine is a license to get to own a Mercedes-Benz. Much the same for someone serving a corporation. People who used to serve a banking house and so on used to be poor little clerks working in that thing. There were very few people with any actual money in the game. And it was a principle to manage these things impeccably. And principle was, for example, your bank, as a matter of principle, did never communicate with the tax authorities. It wasn't a snitch to the tax authorities like it is now. All these principles have collapsed. All of them. I mean, honor, valor, courage in war, bye-bye. The safest place in modern warfare is in the military services of either side. The most unsafe place to be is in the civilian population. Modern war consists of basically both armed sides taking turns at murdering the civilian population. I don't care which area of patriarchy you look at, you will see principle is gone, or condensed into one. Money. I mean, a principle like, don't pollute and destroy the planet or take more than you need. And you have an oil company sucking up oil and making a huge mess and destroying life on beaches and all sorts of fun stuff like that. And if you were the CEO of that company, would you have been able to make different choices? If you had chosen a little more responsibly or a bit more in tune with principle, your board of directors, would have fired your ass so fast and replaced you with someone who will go for the money. Principle has condensed into one. There's a symptom of the end of patriarchy. Another symptom is that patriarchy has to end. It has to show its excess. It has to show clearly to people, unambiguously, that it is, out of control, that it has gone rogue, so to speak, principle-free, really gone rogue. How to describe the symptoms of that? Well, at the top of patriarchy, there always was an alpha male competitive structure that had alpha males heading towards the top. Okay, in ancient Greece, part of the selection was that some of those alpha males got the education of what we'd call in my school a Dakini, in those days a Hetiara, who raised them to their fullness of their power, and their fullness being their feminine side as well as their masculine, complete human beings, as opposed to polarized in one or the other. And so having a capacity for strategic thinking, for overview, as opposed to just tactics. Now, in that overview, one becomes aware of things like what is sufficient and so on. And one becomes aware that, other males that run on a purely linear, purely one-pointed focus need to be checked and curbed and redirected occasionally, because even though one point of focus may be beautiful and brilliant and wonderful as you start out in something you really want, mostly if it's continued way beyond where it's necessary and then, maximized relentlessly, it can turn into a bad idea and need redirection. So one of the symptoms of the collapse of patriarchy is we don't have any constraint really on the excesses of the alpha male, totally linear focused energy, which is, in the world of one principle, money and profit, all geared towards just pure straight up accumulation. If you look, much of patriarchy, or all of patriarchy that has really as its bottom line, let me back up, look, much as we'd like to think so, we haven't moved culturally as far from baboons, for example, as we perhaps like to think. Now, baboons face a problem in their culture. Their alpha males tend to be a predator on their own troop. The nutrition, the health, the neural condition, and so on of their troop members tends to be pretty shabby, while they tend to be extremely overfed and, physically very large as a result of that, and so on. Well worth looking up Robert Sapolsky and the Kikarok baboon troop and checking out that story to get a bit of a background to what I'm talking about here. But patriarchy, in its structure of principle, part of that structure of principle was it had basically, to put it simply, culling systems for the most extreme and most dangerous and most disregarding of overview males, for that category of males. Those who've been radically traumatized or impoverished in their childhood, and no matter how much they get, it will never be enough, and so on. Basically, pretty much every self-made wealthy man, and those who just feel a massive entitlement and a separation from themselves and the rest of humanity as a species almost. There you get the inherited wealth thing, but either which way, wanting more of it and accumulating more of it and being fearful of losing it and all that sort of stuff, and being on a one point of focus with that is extremely dangerous to the culture. And patriarchy within its principal structures knew that. You see the knowing of that enshrined in Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar, where, ambition is a great thing, and Julius was awesome for Rome, but get too greedy, go too far, and the other alpha males are going to take you down. And we've lost that entirely. What used to cull the worst of our alpha males was the principle that if you want to make war, if you want to make a battle, you get out in front of it yourself, your own body in harm's way. You can have big, strong guys all around you. They can take care of you, but you're in the battle. Those who follow you see that you are participating with them. It's been a long, long time since any military commander had the courage or principle to do anything like that. Or any politicians sending the military, not even the military commanders do it, never mind the politicians who send them to it. Imagine Cheney on a horse with a lance having to cope with sacrins in the old Crusades days. Wow. He'd have had to have he would have needed to be fit and strong, and he would have been dead already, is the point. In patriarchy, leading your own battles, those males that are over-aggressive, who don't have a capacity for strategy and overview, are going to have short military careers. Short, very quick. And the other thing that used to remove the worst alpha males, wholesale, was the principle of dueling. Please understand, in an old world duel, even to, first blood, so the intention isn't even lethal, just the settlement of the argument. even there, very, very often, both participants died from the infection 2 weeks later. And when there was a difference between who died and who didn't, typically the challenger in the duel is more at risk of dying. The one whose emotional EQ quotient, fit with being a human being, is so slack that he chooses over some issue to challenge another man to life or death combat, because it gives the other fellow the option of the where and the when and the what. And knowing and controlling the where and the when and the what, if you have any feminine quality, if you have any kind of strategy, hell, that's almost just tactics, you're going to win it. The other guy's a great swordsman, you're a good shot, and you've got the choice. Well, he doesn't have much of a choice, much of a chance at it, does he? So it tended to take out the worst of the alpha males. And that limited the predation of alpha males on the culture and let the culture prosper for the benefits of its members and the males within it, and their possessions. If they did well, then their possessions, the females did okay too. So it's a baboon system, this thing of alpha males predating heavily on their own troop. And the main difference between an alpha male baboon and an alpha male human when it comes to that predation is the alpha male baboon has a natural limitation on him. He's limited by the size of his gut. He can demand the troop fetch food for him. He can beat them up if they took a bite, if he smells it on their breath or sees they took a bite of it, and so on and so on. He can make sure he gets all the good stuff and all his minions fetch it to him. But the amount that he does that and the extent to which he drives them and makes them work for him is limited by the size of his gut. Can you imagine Bill Gates having to carry around a gut proportionate to what he has accumulated from the effort of others? And not about cleverness, the alpha male thing, there's always that clever position you can find yourself in if you ignore principle, where you can benefit and profit unconscionably on the work of others. And how to know if anyone's ever done that? Well, look, if their profits are unreasonable or large, it means they're stealing. It's that simple. If their profits were large and they weren't stealing, well, then there would be competition coming in and knocking their price down to reasonable, as per how the free market economy is supposed to work, yes? So whenever you see that not happening, you can see patriarchy out of control. Too much money being made means too much focus on the money, means not enough attention to principle, means things are going haywire. And look around, from what we're doing to the weather of the planet to everything else, the financial systems, you can see our current crop of top of the end patriarchs, that generation just 20 or so years older than me, are making a right royal cock up of everything. What a mess. What an unconscionable cock up. If you can't see the end of patriarchy in that, you're probably culturally blind. Yeah. So what follows? What follows is that patriarchy has to get worse. This condensation of principle has to get to a point at which people demand something different. The different will be not another one-pointed focus, another war on something new to try and be the solution to all things. The solution will be, and what people will choose, will be the overview of the feminine. Women carry the feminine more than men, kind of obviously. And it's a pretty well-established fact in the world now that if you have 3 women on the board of directors, most of the stupid excesses and insane risk-takings and predatory behavior, basically, on the part of the alpha males on the board, gets curbed to tolerable levels. I'm not really interested in patching patriarchy in that way, but that's a sign of what will take it over. Patriarchy hasn't been a bad thing. It's just as it collapses, it's going to be a bit rough and ugly. And it's going to require the feminine to arise. And what the feminine looks like in that sense is the feminine being the overview, will hopefully just take charge of the patriarchal structures that exist and then, guide them as seems sensible. One symptom of this happening that we're almost on the edge of seeing at the moment with the American election. At the moment, if you want to put this in context, this was the time when it looks like it's going to be Trump or Bernie Sanders or Hillary for president, unless you follow the agenda and you know it's Hillary. I might eat my words later, I'd like to, but it's Hillary. But these things are what Americans choose for their tribune of the plebs in their government system. It's not that that's really important or that the person actually ever does what they promise to do or anything like that. It's not about that. But you can see the sentiment of people in what they vote for and what they say they want in the primaries and in the whole circus as it runs up. You can see it reveals what people want. And the popularity of Trump and Bernie, I believe, has something to do with that they both, and a lot of people are going to find this strange, but they both carry and hold a bit of the feminine. They both have a quality of strategy. They both have a little bit of overview. And I know Trump looks just like a moron, and Bernie looks like locked on his point of view bigot. I know, but where I see that little trace of overview is in response to some questions that they've had. These guys have not responded with, that question, that issue, I have my 10-point plan. Here it is, bang, 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 point, and it will achieve this, that, and the other. That is completely masculine, linear, single-pointed focus, communication about tactics, about simple, masculine, one-pointed focus, application of energy, not necessarily with any overview or understanding. And what I've heard both Bernie and the Trump respond with to questions is, we'll study it, we'll fix it, we'll work it out. Words to that effect. And there's some intelligence coming in. There's something of the feminine mind arising. Is, yes, we have problems. We're going to have to work out what the hell to do. Not, there's a problem, I see the linear solution, here it is. Because if it's a problem worth calling a problem, it is far too complex for any linear system to compute, solve, or work anything useful out in terms of it. I mean, look at all the linear things we've applied throughout history, and what a disaster most of them have been. It takes a responsive overview to look and instruct the linear actions. Overview to hold it. So that's a little sign of the feminine arising, that some people are listening to and liking a politician who goes, we're going to have to fix this. We're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to get in and apply ourselves to the thing, as opposed to, I have a 10-point plan. So, another way of describing this ending of patriarchy, it's maybe a little sweeter, is that patriarchy has been a time for the masculine to show up with what it can do. It's been freed from the overview of the feminine, which last cycle around was horribly oppressive and constrictive. It has to be admitted, way horrible. And it's been freed, and it's had a few thousand years to show up with what it can do. And it can do awesome stuff. It can allegedly put a man on the moon, more or less curb some diseases, it can certainly cause diseases, spread them at an alarming rate, decimate populations, kill en masse, but some awesome stuff too, communicate worldwide, instantaneously, and so on. And now it's time, And in the arising, you will see it will happen, that the feminine, that the quality of overview arises and takes charge and commands these linear things that patriarchy has come up with, and hopefully disposes of a few of the more silly and unnecessary ones. So that's my view of the times we're living in. Gives me rich mixed feelings. I so love the principles of patriarchy, and not that patriarchy ever really, really worked according to those principles, but patriarchy held to an attitude of upholding them. I like that, and I like the principles. I was almost nostalgically sad that I was born into a world this time in which dueling didn't exist. And of course, there's not a lot of likelihood I would be alive now if it did exist. Nonetheless, I have a nostalgia for that. And so when I see a principal being offended for money, or I so want to join the protest that so much of the world gets into of, objecting about that. But it can't be objected to anymore. The momentum of patriarchy is such, and the force of money and profit is such, that it really does pretty much override all else. There's occasional opportunities for awesome heroics in opposing bits of it, yes indeed, but battles. But in the war overall, it's over, And I know that all that opposing the fall of patriarchy, all that opposing the collapse of these things can achieve is a delay, is dragging out the agony of patriarchy's end. That it will probably be quicker and cleaner and easier if the world believes, for example, that the solution to climate change problems is to give the banking cartels an unregulated financial market to play in. And after we see the end result of that, maybe, there's been a few repetitions of history, but, it's got to collapse badly enough for people to notice. And if you look, many of the objectives of Anonymous and other revolutionary organizations, they kind of miss the point a little. And that if they achieved their wildest dreams, then patriarchy would find itself opposed by, for example, a president that actually warns the American people directly of the money, power, alpha male system of the military-industrial complex running out of control and, really getting a undeservedly not very healthy, powerful position in relation to them. But it's already happened. Kennedy said that stuff in, I think, 1965. Between our music, our culture, our literature, our movies, and so on, really everyone can know everything of what all these buggers are up to, and it's really, really not hard to find out, and it's really not all that surprising either. And as they collapse, my suggestion is let them collapse. Let them collapse. Let the day come when nobody will vote for the politician who stands up and goes, I've got a 5-point or 10-point plan. And everybody wants the person with the proven record of being able to research a thing and come to a good outcome with it. And good being useful and juicy in life and of enjoyableness and delight to humanity. As opposed to, it made more profit. Well, patriarchy and your profit, you're on the way down. Enjoy the ride.